Welcome to the Manna at the Top podcast, a space where we can look together for the spiritual nourishment we need for the soul. I'm Gloria, your fellow traveler on this spiritual journey, and I'm here to guide you through our daily manna, offering insights and interpretations to feed your spiritual growth. Today, on this fourth week after Pentecost, Monday, June 17, 2024, the lectionary text is the last verse of 1 Samuel 13, verse 23, continuing through to chapter 14, verse 23. But we need to begin at verse 1 of chapter 13 in order to understand the context of the narrative. We meet Saul, the people's choice for a king. He's been on the job about 2 years, and contrary to God's warning, he has assembled an army of 3,000 men from Israel. His son's name is Jonathan, and Saul gave him 1,000 of the men to be with him. After choosing the 3,000 men, Saul dismissed the rest and sent them back home. This will be Israel's first real army. Jonathan, whose name means God's gift or Jehovah has given, was unlike his father Saul. He was brave, he was amicable, and a remarkable military leader who led several successful attacks on the Philistines. On one of those occasions, his father Saul did the most despicable thing. He sent out a news release stating that he was the person who headed the attack on the garrison of the Philistines, and he took the credit for Jonathan's bold attack. Saul is revealing his true character, which is unpleasant, especially with his son Jonathan. The Philistines were angry. Their garrison had been attacked, and they responded by assembling 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horse riders, and numberless people on foot. When Saul saw this, he and the people of Israel trembled because they knew they were in trouble, and many fled. Saul didn't know what to do and sent word to Samuel, who told him to wait 7 days for him and that he would preside over sacrifices readying Israel for battle. Well, Saul became anxious when the 7 days had passed and Samuel had not come, and the people had lost confidence in him as their leader, and they had scattered. Saul then took matters into his own hands. He offered a sacrifice instead of waiting for Samuel. And when Samuel arrived, he went out to greet him as if he were the real priest. When Samuel, smelling the odor from the sacrifice, asked what he had done, Saul gave a flimsy excuse that the men had scattered and he, Samuel, had not come as he promised. So when he saw how the Philistines were assembling, he saw himself as a priest and felt compelled to offer the burnt offering. Saul was controlled by his feelings and blamed Samuel for not coming when he said he would. That day, Saul learned there would be severe consequences. God would take away Saul's kingdom and replace him with a person whose heart was towards God to rule God's people. Samuel then left Saul without further instructions because he knew Saul would not obey them. As we reflect on Saul's actions, we're reminded of the importance of obedience to God's command. Saul's disobedience brought a halt to his reign, a powerful lesson in the consequences of our actions. This critical spiritual insight from his story guides our spiritual growth and understanding. Well, things went from bad to worse as the Philistines raided the Israelite camp on several occasions. The Israelites had no blacksmiths of their own and had to resort to paying exorbitant fees to the Philistines to sharpen their farming equipment. So the day of battle was about to begin. No one besides Saul and Jonathan had a spear worth using. Here we are at our lectionary text, as the Philistines are positioning themselves for battle. Saul was nowhere to be found because he was hiding under a pomegranate tree with the 600 men that were left. And among them was one of Eli's great grandsons who was wearing an ephod. On the other hand, Jonathan does not tell his father what he's about to do. He only spoke to his young assistant, who encouraged him to do what was his heart, and he would support him. Jonathan proposed a dangerous and suicidal mission, approaching the Philistine garrison from the other side. What mattered to Jonathan was that the Lord was with him, and he took time planning out his strategy while waiting till he was sure the Lord was with him. God was with Jonathan. God sent an earthquake that frightened the Philistines, creating total confusion. Saul and his 600 men heard the commotion happening in the camp of the Philistines, and he resorted to calling on the man with the ephod to tell him what God wanted them to do. But Saul was impatient and abandoned that idea. The Philistines had prevented the Israelites from sharpening their weapons. That day, with the earthquake, the Philistines were so confused they were fighting their own men with their swords. The Israelites with no sharpened swords and the soldiers that had abandoned camp came out of hiding when they heard the Philistines were on the run. The final verse of the lectionary text tells us the excellent report. On that day, the Lord saved Israel. Jonathan, Saul's son, and God had a great victory.